Blood doesn't wash out. Not completely. Not from your hands, not from under your fingernails, not from the creases in your knuckles. I scrubbed my hands raw for 2 years after the war ended, trying to get them clean. Took me that long to realize it wasn't the blood I was trying to wash away. It was the memories of whose blood it was. My name is James Patterson. I was a Navy hospital corpsman during World War II, stationed on hospital ships in the Pacific. I was 19 years old when I enlisted, 23 when the war ended. 4 years that aged me 40. 4 years of blood and screaming and trying to save boys who couldn't be saved. 4 years of watching pieces of human beings come through the door and trying to put them back together. Most days we couldn't. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Working class family. My dad was a longshoreman. My mom a seamstress. I had 2 older brothers, Tommy and Robert. Tommy joined the Army in '42, got sent to North Africa. Robert enlisted in the Marines a month before Pearl Harbor. He was at Guadalcanal. He didn't come home. When I turned 18 in January 1943, I knew I was going too. Could have waited to be drafted, but that felt cowardly after losing Robert. Mom begged me not to go. Dad understood. Said if I had to serve, at least try to do something that wouldn't get me killed in the first week. I enlisted in the Navy. Figured ships were safer than trenches. They asked what I wanted to do, and I said medical. Had taken biology in high school, was decent at science, thought maybe I could help people. Save lives instead of taking them. Do something good in the middle of all that death. The Navy sent me to Hospital Corps School in San Diego. 8 weeks of intensive medical training, anatomy, physiology, first aid, surgery basics, triage, everything a combat medic needed to know. They crammed 2 years of medical school into 8 weeks because that's all the time we had. Our instructors were veteran corpsmen from the First World War, hard men who'd seen the real thing. They didn't sugarcoat anything. Told us straight. Your job is to keep Marines and sailors alive long enough to get them to real doctors. Most of you won't succeed. Men will die in your arms, and you'll move on to the next one. Get used to it now. I thought they were exaggerating, trying to toughen us up with scare tactics. They weren't. I made friends with 2 guys in my class. Eddie Martinez from Texas, wanted to be a doctor after the war. And Frank Kowalski from Chicago, pre-med student who'd enlisted rather than wait for his deferment to run out. We studied together, practiced on each other, made dark jokes about the training dummies that bled fake blood and had fake wounds. Fake blood washes off easier than real blood, Eddie said once, scrubbing red dye from his hands after a training exercise. Frank laughed. Yeah, and fake patients don't scream or die or shit themselves when you're trying to work on them. We all laughed. Gallows humor, but what else could you do? We were kids learning how to saw off limbs and pack chest wounds and perform emergency tracheotomies. Laughter was armor against the horror of what we were training for. After graduation, they assigned me to the USS Solace, a hospital ship operating in the Pacific. The Solace was a converted passenger liner, all white with red crosses painted on the sides, theoretically protected under the Geneva Convention. She had 12 operating rooms, over 700 beds, a full medical staff of doctors, nurses, and corpsmen. She was a floating hospital that received the worst casualties from Pacific battles. The ones too badly wounded to treat on the islands, the ones who needed immediate surgery, the ones who were probably going to die but deserved a chance. I reported aboard in June 1943, assigned to the surgery ward. My job was to assist surgeons, prep patients, maintain instruments, and provide post-operative care. Clean, clinical, professional work in a sterile environment far from the fighting. That's what I thought anyway. The reality was that the surgery ward was a slaughterhouse. We operated constantly during campaigns, 20, 30 surgeries a day. Men came in with wounds I couldn't have imagined. Missing limbs, exposed organs, faces gone, bodies burned beyond recognition. And we tried to save them. Tried to stitch and staple and amputate and repair fast enough to keep them alive. The first time I assisted in surgery, I fainted. Just passed out cold when the surgeon opened up a Marine's chest, and I saw his beating heart, saw the shrapnel embedded in the muscle, saw the blood pumping out around the surgeon's hands. Woke up on the deck, another corpsman standing over me. "Get up, Patterson," he said without sympathy. "You got 10 seconds to get your shit together, then you're back in there. We don't have time for fainters." I got up, went back in. Didn't faint again. You learn fast or you wash out. And washing out meant someone else had to do your job. Someone who might not be as good, might make mistakes, might let men die who could have been saved. So I learned. Learned to compartmentalize the horror, to see bodies as mechanical problems to be solved rather than people in agony. Learned to ignore the screaming, the begging, the crying for mothers and wives and God. Learned to work with blood up to my elbows while the ship rocked in rough seas and the lights flickered and someone was dying on the next table over. Learned to be a machine, cold, efficient, emotionless. Because emotions got in the way of work, and the work was all that mattered. I was good at it. The surgeons praised me, said I had steady hands, kept my cool under pressure, could anticipate what they needed before they asked. I took pride in that. Felt like I was making a difference, saving lives, doing something meaningful. But every night, when I went to my bunk, I'd lie awake seeing the faces of the men who'd died on my table. The ones we couldn't save. The ones who'd bled out or gone into shock or just gave up. Their faces would swim in the darkness, accusing me, asking why I couldn't do more, why I let them die, why I failed them. I started keeping account. Stupid, I know. But I needed to know, needed to track how many lived versus how many died. Some kind of scorecard to prove I was doing more good than harm. By the time the war ended, I'd assisted in over 2,000 surgeries. We saved about 60%, which meant 800 men died on my table, with my hands trying to hold their insides together while life leaked out of them. 800 faces, 800 ghosts, 800 reasons I can't sleep without seeing blood. My first real taste of combat medicine came during the Tarawa invasion in November 1943. We'd been warned it would be bad. The Marines were assaulting a heavily fortified atoll, expected high casualties. But nothing prepared us for what actually came aboard. The first wave of wounded arrived around noon. Landing craft pulled alongside the Solace, and stretcher bearers started hauling men aboard. Dozens at first, then hundreds, faster than we could process them. The triage area became chaos. Corpsmen sorting wounded by severity, sending the worst to surgery, the moderate to the wards, the hopeless to a corner where we'd make them comfortable until they died. I was assigned to Operating Room 3. The surgeon was Lieutenant Commander Barnes, a Baltimore doctor who'd been a trauma surgeon in civilian life. Best surgeon on the ship, could work miracles when there was anything to work with. The first patient came in on a stretcher. Marine, maybe 20 years old. His left leg was gone at the hip, not amputated cleanly, just torn off, probably a shell burst. The stump was a mangled mess of bone and tissue, bleeding despite the tourniquets someone had applied in the field. "Jesus Christ," Barnes muttered, then louder, "Patterson, get that tourniquet tighter. Williams, start a transfusion. We need to debride this and get it properly amputated or he's going to bleed out." I tightened the tourniquet. The Marine screamed, thrashing on the table. We had morphine, but not enough time to wait for it to kick in. Had to work fast. Barnes started cutting away the destroyed tissue. I assisted, holding retractors, swabbing blood, handing him instruments. The smell was overwhelming. Blood and burnt flesh and human waste. The Marine had lost control of his bowels when the injury happened. That's what severe trauma does. strips away all dignity, reduces you to a screaming, shitting animal. We worked for 40 minutes, got the leg properly amputated, stopped the bleeding, closed him up. He'd live, probably. One-legged, traumatized, his life permanently altered, but alive. No time to celebrate. Next patient was already on the table, then another, then another. We operated for 18 hours straight. No breaks, no food. Just surgery after surgery, an assembly line of broken bodies that we tried to repair fast enough to move on to the next one. A kid came in with his intestines hanging out. Took us 2 hours to get them back inside and sewn up. He died anyway. Infection, probably, or shock. We'd never know. A sailor with his face burned off. Couldn't even tell if he was breathing at first. We tried to establish an airway, tried to save him. Couldn't. He suffocated on the table while we watched, unable to help. A Marine with shrapnel in his spine, paralyzed from the waist down, screaming that he couldn't feel his legs, begging us to fix him. We couldn't. The damage was permanent. He'd never walk again, and he knew it. Kept screaming, "Kill me, just kill me," while we worked on him. We couldn't do that either. By the time the surgery rotation ended, I'd assisted in 37 operations. 21 survived long enough to be transferred to the recovery ward. 16 died on the table or shortly after. 16 men who'd been alive that morning, who'd probably been joking with their buddies during the landing, who'd had mothers and girlfriends and futures. Gone. I went to my bunk and threw up. Dry heaves, mostly. Hadn't eaten in 20 hours. Then I lay down and tried to sleep. Couldn't. Kept seeing their faces. The burned sailor struggling to breathe. The paralyzed Marine begging us to kill him. The kid with his guts hanging out, looking confused and scared as we tried to stuff them back inside. Eddie Martinez found me around 200. He looked as wrecked as I felt. "You okay?" he asked. "No." "You?" "No." He sat on the edge of my bunk. Lost count of how many we lost today. At least a dozen in my OR, maybe more. 16 in mine. Jesus. He was quiet for a moment. They told us in training that most wouldn't survive. Didn't make it real until today. Yeah. Patterson. Does it get easier, watching them die? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to tell him we'd get used to it, develop thicker skin, learn to handle it, but I couldn't lie to him. I don't know, Eddie. I hope not. Because if it gets easier, that means we stopped caring. And if we stop caring... I didn't finish. Didn't need to. We both understood. If we stopped caring, we stopped being doctors, became butchers, became machines that processed bodies without seeing the humanity. That would come later. For now, we still cared. Still felt every death. Still carried the weight of the ones we couldn't save. It was agony, but it was also proof we were still human. The campaigns blurred together. Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Different islands, same horror. Marines and sailors getting torn apart, shipped to us in pieces, dying on our tables while we frantically tried to save them. The worst were the burn cases. Burns from flamethrowers, from napalm, from ships on fire, from explosions. Men with third-degree burns over 70, 80, 90% of their bodies. No skin left, just raw flesh, weeping and infected. The pain was unimaginable. Morphine barely touched it. We'd wrap them in sterile dressings, pump them full of fluids, give them all the painkillers we could, and they'd die anyway, slowly, screaming, begging us to end it, and we couldn't. We had to keep them alive, keep them comfortable, watch them suffer for days or weeks before infection or organ failure finally killed them. There was a sailor from Iowa. His name was Danny Morrison. He'd been on a destroyer that took a kamikaze hit. The plane's fuel had splashed over him, set him on fire. His entire body was burned. Face gone. Hands gone. Just a human-shaped mass of charred flesh that somehow was still alive. He lived for 11 days. 11 days of screaming whenever he was conscious, of begging us to let him die, of asking why God was punishing him. We kept him sedated as much as possible, but you can only give so much morphine before it kills them. So sometimes he'd wake up and the agony would be so intense he'd scream until his throat gave out. On day 11, his heart finally stopped. We tried to resuscitate him. That was protocol. But I remember hoping we'd fail, hoping he'd get to finally rest, finally stop suffering. When the surgeon called time of death, I felt relief, felt grateful that Danny Morrison was dead. What kind of person feels grateful when someone dies? A corpsman. That's who. Someone who's seen too much suffering, who knows that sometimes death is mercy. The amputations were different. Those guys usually survived physically. But you could see something die in their eyes when they realized what had happened. When they looked down and saw a stump where a leg used to be. Or worse, when they still felt the missing limb, phantom sensations from nerves that no longer connected to anything. A Marine named Tommy Jefferson lost both legs at Iwo Jima. We amputated one in the field, the other aboard ship. When he woke up from surgery and realized he didn't scream, didn't cry, just stared at the ceiling with this empty expression. I was going to play football for Notre Dame, he said quietly. Had a scholarship. Was going to be something. What do you say to that? You're alive seems cruel. You can still have a life sounds like a lie when the life he wanted just got blown apart by a Japanese mine. I said nothing. Just held his hand while he cried silently. Tears running down his face, mourning the future he'd lost. He attempted suicide 3 days later, tried to choke himself with his IV line. We stopped him, put him on watch. But you could see it in his eyes. He was already dead inside. The body survived, but the person was gone. Don't know what happened to him after we transferred him stateside. Hope he found a reason to live, but I doubt it. The psychological casualties were harder in some ways. Physically intact, but mentally shattered. Men who'd seen too much, endured too much, broke under the weight of combat. They'd come aboard screaming about Japanese soldiers who weren't there, or catatonic and unresponsive, or violent and dangerous to themselves and others. We didn't have psychiatric facilities, just a few beds in a quiet ward, some sedatives, and hope that time would heal them. It didn't, usually. Most got shipped home still broken, still seeing whatever horrors had destroyed them. The lucky ones died in combat. The unlucky ones survived to spend the rest of their lives in VA hospitals, trapped in their own minds. Frank Kowalski rotated through the psychiatric ward for a month, came back shaken. Those guys, he said one night over coffee, they're still in the war, still fighting battles that are over. And we can't reach them, can't bring them back. They're just lost. At least they're physically whole, I said. Frank looked at me. Are they? Their brains are injured, Patterson. It's not a visible wound, but it's just as real, maybe worse. You can fit a prosthetic leg. How do you fix a broken mind? I didn't have an answer. Still don't. By 1945, I'd been aboard the Solace for nearly 2 years, was now a senior corpsman, training new guys, running my own OR during surgeries. The work was routine by then, not easier, just familiar. I knew every type of wound, every surgical procedure, every way a human body could be destroyed, and every method we had to try to fix it. I'd stopped keeping score, stopped counting the saved versus the lost. The numbers were too big, too overwhelming. thousands of surgeries, hundreds of deaths. If I thought about it too hard, I'd go insane. So I didn't think, just worked. Became the machine they'd trained me to be. Eddie Martinez had been transferred to a Marine unit, Corpsman attached to Marine infantry to provide field medical care. Last I heard from him was a letter in March 45, right before Iwo Jima. Said he was scared but ready. Said he'd see me after the war. We'd get drunk and tell stories and try to forget. Eddie died on the beach at Iwo Jima. First day, shot by a sniper while treating a wounded Marine. Took a bullet through the chest. Died instantly. His CO sent me his personal effects, a watch, some letters, a photo of his family. That's all that was left of my friend. A box of belongings and a casualty notification. I cried for an hour. First time I'd cried since the war started. Then I went back to work. What else could I do? Grieving wouldn't bring Eddie back. Wouldn't save the next man on the table. The work was all that mattered. The war ground on. More islands, more invasions, more casualties. The Solace would fill up with wounded. We'd treat them, transfer them stateside or back to duty, then sail to the next operation and do it again. An endless cycle of blood and surgery and death. I started having nightmares. Would wake up gasping, covered in sweat, convinced I was back in the OR with blood on my hands and someone dying in front of me. Sometimes the nightmares would continue even after I woke up. I'd see casualties in my bunk, hear screaming in the hallways, smell blood and burnt flesh everywhere. The ship's doctor noticed. Put me on light duty for a week, said I needed rest. But rest didn't help. The nightmares followed me. The memories were always there, just behind my eyes, waiting for any quiet moment to resurface. Combat fatigue, the doctor diagnosed. You've been at this too long without a break. I'm recommending you for stateside rotation. No, I said, I'm needed here. The new corpsmen don't have the experience. Men will die if I'm not here. Men are dying anyway, Patterson. And you're going to break if you don't take time off. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. But I couldn't leave, couldn't abandon my post. The guilt of taking a break while others suffered would have been worse than the exhaustion and nightmares. So I stayed. Okinawa was the worst campaign. 82 days of brutal combat. Casualties flooded in constantly. Kamikaze attacks, artillery, close combat, everything. We worked around the clock, operating on men who were sometimes dead before they made it to the table. The Solace took a hit during Okinawa. Not a direct hit. That would have killed us all, Geneva Convention be damned. But a kamikaze clipped us, crashed into the water alongside, sent shrapnel through the hull. Killed 2 nurses and a corpsman, wounded a dozen others. After that, we knew the Red Crosses didn't matter. We were targets like everyone else. The Japanese didn't care about hospital ships, or maybe they did and attacked us anyway. Either way, we weren't safe. That night, lying in my bunk listening to repair crews patch the hull, I realized I might die here, might never make it home, might die trying to save someone else, or might die randomly when a plane crashed into us, or might just work until my heart gave out from exhaustion and stress. And I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no grief, just numbness. I'd been doing this for so long, seen so much death, that my own mortality seemed irrelevant. I was already dead in all the ways that mattered. Only my body kept moving, kept working, kept trying to save people I couldn't save. My breaking point came 3 weeks before the war ended, August 1945. We were still treating casualties from Okinawa, still overwhelmed with wounded. Another batch came aboard. Routine by then, just more broken bodies to repair. One of them was Frank Kowalski. I didn't recognize him at first. His face was covered in bandages, his left arm missing at the elbow. But when I checked his dog tags, I saw the name, Frank Kowalski, my friend from Corpsman school, the guy I'd trained with, joked with, confided in. Now he was on my table, unconscious, missing an arm, with shrapnel wounds across his chest and face. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't think, just stared at him, at what was left of my friend, and something inside me shattered. "Patterson," Dr. Barnes snapped, "I need you focused. This man needs surgery now." I tried to work, tried to be professional, to see Frank as just another patient, but my hands were shaking. Couldn't hold the instruments properly. Kept seeing him as he'd been at training, young, hopeful, making dark jokes about fake blood and fake patients. "Patterson, you're compromised. Step away from the table. Williams, take over." I stepped away, watched another corpsman take my place, watched them work on Frank, trying to save him. And I couldn't help, couldn't do my job, couldn't save my friend. Frank survived the surgery, lost his arm permanently, had severe facial scarring, but he'd live. When he woke up, I was there. "Jimmy?" His voice was weak, confused. "Jimmy Patterson?" "Yeah, Frank. It's me. You're on the Solace. You're safe." He tried to smile. Couldn't. The facial injuries wouldn't let him. "Guess you're stuck putting me back together, huh?" "Already did. You're going to be okay." "Okay." He laughed bitterly. "One arm, face full of scars, probably blind in one eye. Yeah, I'm okay. You're alive. Is that enough?" He looked at me with his good eye. "Is being alive enough when you're broken into pieces?" I didn't answer, couldn't, because I didn't know. Was survival enough? Was it better to live damaged than to die whole? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times, watching men I'd saved face the reality of their injuries, watching amputees realize they'd never walk again, watching burn victims see their ruined faces, watching broken men try to rebuild lives from pieces. "I wanted to be a doctor," Frank said quietly. "Can't be a surgeon with one hand. Can't do much of anything with one hand. You can still practice medicine, internal medicine, psychiatry, lots of specialties." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't try to make this okay. It's not okay. I'm not okay. And pretending otherwise is just, it's bullshit, Jimmy." He was right. It was bullshit. All the platitudes we told ourselves, all the comfort we offered to the wounded, it was lies. Pretty lies to make horror palatable, to make suffering seem meaningful. But Frank was calling me on it, forcing me to face the truth I'd been avoiding. We saved them so they could live with their wounds. But was that mercy or cruelty? That night, I went to the ship's fantail, stood at the rail looking at the dark water, thought about jumping, about ending it, about stopping the nightmares and the guilt and the endless parade of broken bodies and the weight of all the ones I couldn't save. Would have been easy. Step over the rail, let go, sink into the dark, stop being a corpsman, stop carrying the weight, just stop. I stood there for 2 hours. Couldn't do it. Not because I wanted to live. I didn't particularly. But because Eddie was dead and Frank was broken, and if I quit too, who'd be left? Who'd take care of the next casualties? The new guys didn't have the experience. Men would die. So I went back to my bunk. Didn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the overhead, waiting for morning so I could go back to work. Back to the OR. Back to the blood and the screaming and the endless trying to save people who were already dead. The war ended August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. Everyone celebrated. Sailors drinking, cheering, crying with relief. The war was over. We'd won. No more casualties. No more death. I felt nothing. Stood on deck watching the celebration and felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no joy, no grief, just empty. The Solace stayed in the Pacific for 2 more months, treating remaining casualties and helping with occupation duties. Then finally, in October, we sailed for San Diego, home. The Navy discharged me in December 1945, gave me an honorable discharge, my service medals, thanks for my contribution to the war effort, told me I was a hero, that I'd saved hundreds of lives, that I should be proud. I went home to Portland. My parents threw a welcome home party. Mom cried, Dad shook my hand, neighbors came over to congratulate me. Tommy was home too. He'd survived North Africa and Italy, came back with a limp and nightmares, but otherwise intact. Everyone wanted to hear stories. What was the war like? What did you see? How many people did you save? They wanted the sanitized version, the heroic narrative, the story where I was a brave corpsman saving lives and making a difference. I couldn't give them that. Couldn't talk about the blood, the screaming, the dying, the ones I couldn't save. Couldn't explain that saving lives often meant condemning men to live with catastrophic injuries. Couldn't make them understand that I was as much a casualty as anyone who'd been shot. So I said very little. Gave them the version they wanted. Yes, it was hard. Yes, we saved many men. Yes, I'm glad to be home. Lies and half-truths and omissions, same as the comfort I'd given dying men. Say what people need to hear, not what's true. I tried to go to college on the GI Bill, pre-med like I'd planned before the war. Wanted to become a real doctor, use my experience to help people. But I couldn't handle it. Couldn't sit in anatomy class without seeing real bodies, real wounds, real death. Couldn't study physiology without remembering men dying from physiological failure I couldn't prevent. Couldn't make it through the first semester. Dropped out. Got a job at a warehouse. Physical work. Mindless. Safe. No blood. No casualties. No responsibility for lives. Just loading boxes. Unloading trucks. Going through motions. I started drinking. Not heavily at first. Just a couple beers after work to help me sleep, to quiet the nightmares. But it escalated. By 1947, I was drinking every night, sometimes during the day. Enough to numb the memories, to blur the faces that haunted me, to make the guilt manageable. My parents worried. Tommy tried to talk to me. He understood in his own way. He had nightmares too, but he'd found ways to cope that didn't involve a bottle. I couldn't seem to find those ways. Frank Kowalski wrote me letters occasionally. He'd made it home, was trying to adjust to life with one arm, working as a research assistant at a university since he couldn't practice surgery. His letters were always upbeat, optimistic, talking about his future plans. But I could read between the lines, could see the same brokenness I felt, just hidden better. His last letter came in 1949. Said he was getting married, things were looking up. He'd finally made peace with his injuries. 3 weeks later, I got another letter from his sister. Frank had committed suicide, overdose of sleeping pills. Left a note saying he couldn't live as half a person anymore, that he was tired of pretending to be okay. I didn't go to the funeral. Couldn't face it. Couldn't face his family. Couldn't face other veterans. Couldn't face the reality that my friend had given up. That maybe he was right to give up. That maybe death was better than living broken. I met a woman in 1950, Sarah. She worked at the library, was patient and kind, and didn't push me to talk about the war. We got married in 1951. I thought maybe marriage would help. Maybe having someone to live for would give me purpose, help me move past the war. It didn't. I tried to be a good husband, tried to build a normal life. But the nightmares continued, the drinking continued, the numbness continued. Sarah tried to understand, tried to help. But how could she? She hadn't been there, hadn't seen what I saw, hadn't carried what I carried. We're still married, 6 years now, no kids. I can't bring children into this world, can't risk passing on whatever's broken inside me. Sarah deserves better than what I can give her. Deserves a husband who isn't haunted, who doesn't wake up screaming, who doesn't spend every day trying not to see blood on his hands. But she stays. I don't know why. Loyalty, maybe. Or hope that someday I'll be the person I was before the war. That person doesn't exist anymore. He died on the Solace, drowned in blood and broken bodies and the weight of 800 deaths. I don't work anymore. Can't hold a job. The stress triggers flashbacks. I'll be doing something routine and suddenly I'm back in the OR, hands covered in blood, someone dying on the table. I've been fired 4 times for episodes. Now I just stay home. Do odd jobs when I can. Live off Sarah's salary and what little disability the VA gives me. The VA says I have combat fatigue or shell shock or whatever term they're using now. Offered to put me in a hospital, give me treatment. I refused. What would treatment do? Make me forget? Make the memories go away? I don't want to forget. Those 800 men deserve to be remembered, even if remembering destroys me. My hands still shake, especially in the morning before the first drink. They shake with the weight of all the bodies I couldn't repair, all the wounds I couldn't heal, all the lives that slipped through my fingers despite my best efforts. Blood doesn't wash out, not from your hands, not from your memory, not from your soul. I've been trying for 12 years to wash it away. Tried scrubbing, tried drinking, tried forgetting, tried everything. It's still there, still coating my hands, still under my fingernails, still in every crease and line, permanent, indelible. The stain of 800 deaths that I witnessed, that I tried to prevent, that I failed to stop. People thank me sometimes. Thank you for your service. They mean well. They think corpsmen are heroes, that we saved lives, that we did something noble and good. And maybe we did. Maybe the 60% we saved justifies the 40% we lost. Maybe saving 1,200 lives balances out 800 deaths. But it doesn't feel balanced. It feels like failure, like inadequacy, like I should have done more, been better, saved more. The ones who lived are abstract. They got transferred. I never saw them again. Don't know if they recovered or what happened to them. But the dead are real, specific, individual. I remember their faces, their wounds, the exact moment life left their eyes. I'm 33 years old. The war ended 12 years ago. But I'm still aboard the Solace, still in operating room 3, still trying to save men I can't save, still watching them die, still feeling their blood on my hands. Blood doesn't wash out. That's what I've learned. That's what the war taught me. You can scrub your hands raw, can try every method of cleaning, can wear the skin off your knuckles trying to get clean, but the blood stays. The stain is permanent, and maybe that's how it should be. Maybe corpsmen are supposed to carry the blood, carry the dead, carry the guilt. Maybe that's our penance for surviving when so many didn't, for being the ones who tried to save them and failed. I saved over 1,200 lives during the war. That's what the Navy says. That's what my discharge papers say. But I remember the 800 who died. Remember every face, every wound, every last breath. The living might forgive me for not saving them. The dead never will, and neither will I. So I carry them, all 800. Carry their blood on my hands, their faces in my nightmares, their deaths in my soul. Carry them until my body gives out and I join them, until the blood finally washes away in whatever comes after this life. If anything comes after. If there's any justice, any mercy, any peace. I doubt it. But I'll find out eventually. And maybe then, finally, my hands will be clean.